All right, the ink has barely dried on the president's proposal, but it is already setting off a big partisan battle on Capitol Hill.
We just got the president's budget submission just this morning. So this is the beginning of that step. What I'm encouraged by is the notion that we're going to begin rebuilding our military.
This budget is not a statement of values of anyone. That President Trump has shown that he does not value the future of our children and working families. It fails to recognize that the health of America, the strength of America, does not just depend on our military might.
Whenever she talks about morality and government spending, I have such a violent internal reaction that involves bile and heaving. All right, even with control of the House and Senate, this budget plan is no layup for the president. In fact, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has signaled that he strongly opposes parts of the plan, particularly deep cuts to the State Department. So, will this get passed, or is it already dead on arrival? Well, joining me now, it's National Review reporter and Greg Gutfeld show correspondent Kat Timpf. She's the first part of the party panel. Jamie Weinstein, he's the man in the middle, host of the Jamie Weinstein Show podcast and contributor at The Guardian. Buck Sexton is here, former CIA officer and host of Buck Sexton with America Now. That's a radio program that you must interface with nightly. So, Buck, I want to talk a little bit about the State Department cuts because, you know, Chris Coons said that if you increase military spending, that sends a message to the world that you are using your might and you are giving up on diplomacy by making such deep cuts to foreign aid and the State Department. What do you say?
One of the most senior State Department officials I've ever had the privilege of having as a mentor and friend said to me once that if people who work for the State Department cared as much about diplomacy as they did about who would pay their travel expenses and how quickly they would get paid, we would already have peace in the Middle East. There is a lot of bureaucracy and waste at state. It is an organization, I think, that is best summed up by the motto, we were here before the president, we'll be here after the president, or rather, presidents come and go, the department is forever. How deep these cuts go, I think that there'll be some negotiation on this. I don't think that it'll. And by the way, I believe the entire budget proposal from Trump is a statement of policy preferences. As your previous guest pointed out, it really doesn't make much difference in terms of the numbers. We are heading towards financial oblivion, even if we do everything Trump says we should do in this. But it does establish some very interesting arguments. I think first and foremost, it shows liberals across the country spitting out their cappuccinos as they hear that there might be a cut in budget for NPR. And, yeah, I know, it makes me sad.
It will still exist, though.
Big Bird.
And
I
think
of course it will. It's a tiny part of their budget.
Thomas Massey made one of the best points that if you cut the Department of Education, parents will still send their kids to school. Yeah. You know, and also if you make cuts to the EPA, people still will want a clean environment. Do you believe that, or do you think government is the only thing keeping us from being destroyed by our own causes?
Well, I think if these cuts are implemented, I don't believe the world would end. I'm not sure, I can't guarantee it, but I'm pretty sure we would go on. But again, I think the key point here is that this is a lot of noise. You know, you get a lot of Republicans who say when you have to do budget cuts, let's cut the foreign aid budget, and Democrats say let's raise taxes. Neither of these things solve the long-term fiscal picture. Yeah. It's basically all entitlement reform. So we're going to have a lot of debate over a very small part of the budget that really is not determinative of whether we have fix our fiscal picture. Yeah. It's entitlements, 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 and Donald Trump says he doesn't want to touch entitlements.
No, and neither does either party. I actually think Republicans and Democrats breathe a sigh of relief every time the president comes out and says that. You know, AARP has that commercial, like the president said, that you worked for this money and it's yours. So basically, we're never going to have a meaningful budget that actually takes us out of financial crisis.
We really aren't, especially because, as you mentioned, this is spending the same amount of money. And with the hikes in the military over and over and over again, everybody knows the Department of Defense is spending way too much money. Yeah. And
I don't know that.
They spend it on things they're not supposed to be spent. That's an established fact. Well, they know that no matter how much they spend, they're going to get more. And that the more money you make, you start to spend it on stupid stuff. But the military, everybody does that. Like, I spend money on, like, Ubers to go half a mile. I didn't do that when I was a waitress just because, you know, I'm not rich now, but I make a little more money. It's kind of what happens. Only difference is that's my money.
They should reform the appropriations process.
Exactly.
The way they spend the money is probably even more important than dealing with this money. By the way, sequestration, which was when they're like, finally, we're going to cut. Even Republicans were willing to say, we'll cut defense. No, they weren't. They weren't. That was all.
Hillary Clinton said one of the things that she would do if she were elected president was reverse sequestration.
Of course, because spending money is popular. And this is what, as you were saying,
spending money on defense is popular with both parties.
money
now.
that somebody else is going to pay in the future is a popular thing to do.
There's no question that you have to try to not spend $1,000 on an Uber ride if you're in the Defense Department. But if you're going to cut the defense budget, you have to have a debate over their mission. I'm actually for a strong American role in the world. Yeah. But if you're going to cut the Defense Department, you're going to have to reduce America's role in the world. That's where the debate has to begin. You can't begin by first cutting the defense budget. Well, that's where the debate should be to begin. But you can't say, do what you're doing now in the world, also we're cutting back your defense.
See, I feel the same way about defense that I do about Nancy Pelosi, and I think it's immoral to not support the soldiers and Marines who defend freedom and defend this country by misappropriating so much money in the Defense Department. Yeah. I think the money is misspent. I think there are so many duplicate programs, just like there are in every other layer of federal bureaucracy.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think those...
Yeah, we do have special obligations, though. Whenever you see this chart, and it will be trotted out, usually by whichever opposition party is trying to make a point about long-term spending, it says we spend more than the next 7 countries combined. We also provide the world's blue water navy and the protection for that. And there's... you're giving me a little libertarian eyes there. I can see that.
Yeah, but maybe other people should be protecting shipping lanes.
Well, then the Chinese all of a sudden get to rope off.
I think the president is actually right when he talks about, only providing a quarter of UN peacekeeping.
But then the Chinese get to rope off the South China Sea and be like, you know what, we're just going to say who gets to come and go here, which would be a problem for us. The
world without America in the lead, I'm afraid of that world where China has a disproportionate power in Asia.
But I think you're misframing the argument. I don't think that America takes a backseat or America is a weaker nation because we're smarter how we spend our military dollars.
Well, I think it should be more about strategy and not just, oh, here's more money, take it, especially when you see how they're spending it now.
Kat and I were both in the military for a long time. You're not talking to a couple of skirt-wearing civilians here.
I'm the first. I mean, the reason I feel so comfortable talking about the State Department's budget is because when you see the rest of the federal government, anyone who says there's not waste, just ask a room full of government employees, how many of you are analysts? And all these people raise their hand, what are you all analyzing? You're all looking at this, and I was one of them. You're all looking at the same information. How many reports do we think that the secretary of such and such of the president's going to read? Not as many as all these analysts are producing, I promise. That I will debate anyone on, I guarantee you.
Too many analysts. Cut out those analysts, and then maybe we can afford some catalog.
And analyst means I show up, sit in a chair the taxpayer pays for, and shuffle a bunch of paper around and go to meetings.
Taxation is theft. That's not okay. All right, well, we've got so much more to discuss with this brilliant panel, and we're going to see them a little bit later. John McCain and Rand Paul have been at odds on a number of issues for quite some time. We're going to talk about how the Arizona senator just added fuel to the fire, and it involves Vladimir Putin. First up, though, the president hit the road to make a big push for Republicans' new health care bill. But some GOP senators are hoping the plan never gets close to the president's desk. We'll explain why next.
Taking on a climb, and it's long enough to put the best of us on our backs. Walking up a slide.
New music from them. How exciting. That's not it. Whatever. Glad you're here. The political battle between Republican Senators John McCain and Rand Paul just got turned up to 11, with Senator McCain accusing the senator from Kentucky of being in cahoots with the Russians.
The senator from Kentucky is now working for Vladimir Putin.
Well, that is obviously quite an accusation. It all has to do, rather, with Rand Paul's objection to a bill that would advance the tiny European nation of Montenegro's membership in NATO. Well, Rand Paul is no pushover, and this morning he fired back.
You know, I think he makes a really, really strong case, for term limits. I think maybe he's past his prime. I think maybe he's gotten a little bit unhinged.
Oh, no, you didn't. Come on, man. So who will prevail? And is everybody now accusing everybody else of being in bed with the Russians? It's a crowded house over there. Party panel is back. Katherine Timpf, Jamie Weinstein, and Buck Sexton. So, Buck, I will start with you. Obviously, there's some acrimony. We can get into the personality issues. But I think Rand Paul makes a good point. We don't have to have every unstable nation in the NATO alliance.
Well, first of all, surly Rand Paul is my favorite Rand Paul. So I'll start there. I like it when he decides that he's going to take
There are different
approach.
shades and flavors of Rand.
Right, there's almost like mellow surfer Rand Paul, and then there's like, oh, you just want to spend this into oblivion, and he cracks the knuckles and he goes, okay, on Montenegro, yeah, in terms of population and size, this is almost like saying Micronesia, who were part of the coalition of the willing, by the way, back in the day with Bush.
Yeah, they sent 14 soldiers.
They sent a handful, literally, a handful of them, but look at this from the perspective of not only is it an increase in our defense obligation in the sense that now we're adding a country that, once again, there's a messaging issue here. We're adding a country into NATO. NATO needs to be paying more for their own defense, as the NATO countries have even admitted recently. This was a big problem originally for Trump. They were saying, oh, he just wants them to pay more. And actually, they're supposed to pay more. They have an obligation. They're supposed to pay more for the defense.
I don't disagree with that.
But where this becomes an issue is much more on how Russia views this. This is former Yugoslavia. There's much greater sensitivity, as there was with Kosovo before that, to the U.S. picking off and pulling into the alliance. From the Russian perspective, they view this as aggression. Now, I know we can debate whether it is or not. The point is, this ratchets up tensions with them. I will say, and as you said in your intro, that now saying someone is doing Putin's work, this is the new, like, saying someone's a fascist, which was decades ago what you said about anything you didn't like. That's what this is now. You're doing Putin's work. You're a Russian. Yeah,
so fascist to racist and now a Putinist. Well, I mean, that's what's happening here.
I think we need some clarification from John McCain. Is he saying that Rand Paul is actually an aide to Vladimir Putin, or is it like a more subtle person, like he's an executive at Gazprom or a host on RT? Yeah. I mean, I think this is worthwhile for the debate. I think this is worthy of debate. You cut off debate when you call someone a lackey of Putin. But I'll just say this, it's not by bringing Montenegro into NATO, you're not alienating Russia.
Nations are supposed to be stable, though, if they come into
Russia is trying to push the boundaries here. And you have to at some point say, this matters. The boundaries and borders in Europe matter. Yeah. And we're going to push back against this bully over there. And maybe he'll take a step back instead of keep pushing forward.
All right, so I want to know if you're as conflicted as I am. Because on one hand, I respect and admire Rand Paul's idealism. And I understand the case that he's making. I think both senators are being quite immature. And I also happen to work with Senator McCain's daughter and think that
good friend. Yeah, wonderful. See, it's so interesting to me when I hear people talk about our military being depleted, being the same people who want to get more and more involved. There's a completely reasonable argument for not wanting to take on a nation that's as troubled as this under our belts. And I agree with Rand Paul on this. I don't work for Putin, never even interned for Putin. I also think that just
you didn't
not
do
to brag,
that free summer internship?
But just to, it's fun as it sounded. But just because maybe there might be something that works for us and works for them doesn't mean we can't do it.
I want to thank the panel. Buck, Jamie, and Kat.
Thank you.
A glorious night had by all, especially you. You're welcome. Jeff Sessions says marijuana is almost as bad for you as heroin. Because all those people who've OD'd on marijuana. Oh, that's right, no one has ever. I'm going to ask Catherine Maggie Ward what the Attorney General has been a smoking. That's next.